This is Dr. Mike with Renovatio Leadership Institute in the Optimal Performance Lab. Today we are going to be talking with Dan Thurman of Motivation Works and danthurman.com. Dan is an amazing speaker and he is a personification of performance.
Dan, how you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you, Mike.
No problem. Thank you so much for coming on this call today to talk to me about your book, Off Balance on Purpose. Now,
That's
Dan,
right.
I have a question for you. The concept of being off balance on purpose, where did that come from?
Oh, that's a really great question. And first of all, let me just say thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, a fellow, passionate human being who I consider you kind of like a kindred spirit in life. You're about trying to figure out how to live this thing to the fullest, and you're
Yes.
trying to help other people do that too, which is just an awesome cause. So thank you for the opportunity to help you do that.
Thank you,
I
Dan.
wrote the book Off Balance on Purpose because I had been in and around all of these professional organizations and top level organizations, companies who hired me to speak for them and to help them with performance issues. And so we would, for years, this concept of life balance would come up, and people would talk about life balance. We believe in life balance. We help our people achieve life balance. And then the more I like investigated that and what it meant to them, the more I realized they didn't know what it meant to them, and there was really no methodology, no plan for achieving balance. So then I started saying, well, wait a second, is this even something that's achievable? I mean, is the premise wrong? And I really came to the conclusion that it was, and that balance and really the pursuit of balance as a future goal to try to achieve balance is really not what it's all about. And it actually sets you up for frustration and guilt and disappointment and all of the debilitating effects along the way.
One of the things that I thought was really powerful, specifically in the beginning of the book, and what really I think it opened me up and prepared me for your message was this. You start talking about the analogy of the tightrope walker, and
Right.
how when someone's walking on a tightrope, they're never going to be fully balanced. They can't. It's impossible to be fully balanced. Now, I've never walked a tightrope, but let me ask you a question. What happens if you look back?
Well, okay, so yeah, a couple things there. Um, any kind of a physical balance skill, and a lot of what I teach, because of my background, comes from physicality. I believe there are kind of universal principles in the world that really support and teach us how we should live or how we should look at performance. So, what I learned from walking tightropes and learning gymnastics and acrobatics and riding unicycles and all of those balance skills is this: balance is not what you get. You never achieve balance. Balance is what you do. It's about making adjustments constantly. You are balancing. And so when we say, hey, we want to really look at life balance, well, you should. Life balance is a skill, it's a discipline, it's not a goal because you never achieve it. So you asked what happens when you look back or when you look down, and you are immediately disoriented from the goal and really from what you're trying to accomplish. You can lose your performance in an instant just because of a disconnection from the right perspective. So physically, what happens is if you look down, you have no sense by which to judge where you're going or what your equilibrium really is at any given moment. And you're late. You suddenly are behind in terms of the inputs or adjustments that you need to make along the journey. And I think that's a metaphor that really speaks beautifully in life to where we place our focus as we try to navigate toward the future goal.
So do you think it's important to have moment to moment focus? Not so much, I mean, having that long-term view, but then focusing on that moment, just one step at a time, moving forward and
Yeah,
forward and forward.
absolutely. We skip a lot of those moments, and I think that's the mistake, especially in today's age, people make because we're so plugged in, we're bombarded with technology. the pace of life is going faster and faster and faster. And so we always think about what's next, right? The next moment, the next um, conversation, and the next goal, and we miss the moments that are happening right in front of us. So what I try to teach people is, don't try to be perfect, strive to be present, and understand that, in the midst of all this chaos and acceleration, the real skill is to learn to slow down just enough so that you catch those spaces between what you hear and how you choose to respond, or what you were doing and then what you're doing now, or what you're doing next, and making clear and deliberate decisions about what you choose to say. And you can only do that if you're really present in the moment. It's a skill that I think takes a lot of discipline, and it's one I'm still continuing to try to learn every day.
One of the things that so I teach students in classes, and I focus a lot on teaching them the performance piece as part of like organizational development, that kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I was reading a book the other day by Joe Hyams, and the book was called Zen in the Martial Arts. And he studied with Bruce Lee, and just, and he learned all these lessons. But one of the lessons that I thought was really, really powerful is he talked about taking a pause, taking a moment to step back. And he gave the analogy of fighting or preparing to go to battle with an opponent. And he said, good artists, martial artists, they might go in for a punch, but then they pull back and they wait. They take a pause so they can recalibrate and look at the strategy that they have and say, wait, is this working? Is this not working? So I think that is like totally on point when you talk about having that, taking that moment and just taking a second to breathe and really think about where you're going. It's so powerful what you're saying. So powerful.
I totally agree with that statement. It sounds like another great example of what we're talking about. And that's what we're always doing in life, is we're looking for examples outside of us that can really help us figure this thing out that's inside of us.
Yes. Now let me ask you this: if we can't, like, you talk about not, being, we talk about being off balance. If we can't truly be in balance, what is the alternative? How should we lead this life?
Well, well, what I call it is obviously off balance on purpose. That's the name of the book. Um, and what that means to me is actually really, really thick. There's a lot of meaning there
Deep.
in those four words. Thanks. Yeah. And so off balance is the reality, right? Because life is not this hypothetical future. What I say is life is an undeniable present. It's happening now. That's the only thing you ever get, is the present moment. So we've already talked about it, how we need to be there, be in the present moment. So, but being in this off balance, ever changing world, you realize, well, you've got an opportunity in those moments to shape what that change really is, to create that change for yourself, and then to create it for others, and ultimately to create it in the world, which is so desperately needed. So on purpose really means that we're making it intentional. We're bringing a sense of deliberate action to what we do, and also a purpose, a mission, a meaning that is bigger than just what's going on your to-do list or the immediate demands that are right in front of you. You bring with you a sort of a secret mission, or you're living your principles and your values, and you're bringing purpose into all that you do. To me, that's the goal, is to embrace the uncertainty and the fact that things are changing, but to be off balance, leaning in on purpose.
Now, you talk about purpose, and here's my question that I have for you. And I've been wanting to ask you this probably for a year. What drives you? Like, what is it that keeps you? Because I know that you're constantly moving around, you're constantly giving of yourself, and we know that. I don't know what you're like. What is it like? What is that motivation? What is that higher purpose that calls you to do what you're doing?
Well, thank you for asking that. I do have a faith in God. That is a huge part of my purpose, and I believe I have a God-given mission um, to an abundance of energy and positivity. And from the time I was a kid, I thought that I could see things a little differently than other people could, and that it was um, my goal to become a teacher and to help people. What drives me in front of my audiences is really this idea that I can liberate people from their own burdens. In other words, um, everybody out there is working so hard, and they're all stressed out. They're burdened with both personal obligations and commitments, and it never seems to be enough. They're always being asked to get more production, more performance, more revenue. How do you get to the next level or the next job description, whatever it may be? And so they're after it. They're going for it. But then at the same time, they are so dedicated to their families and the people they love and the people they care about. And so they're also putting in so much effort and time in there. And then on top of all of that, while they're really working so hard, is this extra layer of guilt. And they're thinking, I'm not enough because I can't be all things to all people all the time. And that burden of that guilt is what really separates you from the present moment. And you can't be your complete self. And understand, hey, you are you. You bring all of you to what you do every single day. And that's all you got. So show up with everything you got, whether it is a personal or professional scenario, and understand how life is integrated. It's connected. And so one of the greatest joys for me is after a presentation when people tell me, thank you. I've been really giving myself a hard time on this, and I thought I was going about it all wrong. And you've given me a new way to look at it that really helps me understand I can do this.
That's powerful what you're saying, and it actually makes me think about how you talked about the different the different cylinders, or the different the different life domains that you mentioned here in the book. And one of the one of them was spirituality that you talked about. That also piqued my interest when I viewed the TED Talk, because you integrated all of the aspects of the person, not just one. Um,
So those 5 spheres you're talking about, which are
yes.
your work and your relationships,
Yeah.
so let's go through them real quick. So your work, your professional pursuits, your commitments, we talked about how do you get to the next level? How do you strive for the career of your dreams? How do you contribute, in a meaningful way professionally? Secondly, are your relationships, the people you care about, the people you care for, right? And most balance books will say, you got to protect your time in each area, keep them separate from each other so that they don't interfere with each other, which is ridiculous because there's not enough time to do that. And they're always intersecting in your thinking, which is where we really get our energy, where we choose to spend our time, our money, our thought. And so the concept of integration is really the key. Okay, the third sphere is your health, which is where you get the energy to go after these dreams and goals and be there for the people you care about. And so getting exercise, nutrition, adequate rest, managing your stress, so it's your inner health, your mental health, as well as your physical health. And then spiritual growth, because we're looking for a sense of purpose that's bigger than us.
Yep.
So that may mean practicing your spiritual beliefs, your principles, your faith, whatever that means to you. For some people, it just means communing with nature or volunteering in their community. And I'm not trying to impress or, in this context, my beliefs
Sure.
on anyone else. Sure. I'm suggesting that we're all looking, and we're all trying to expand that sphere. And that's part of this concept of being truly successful. And then the fifth sphere is your personal interests. What is it that makes you unique? Like for me, when I was 11 years old and I discovered this crazy hobby of being a professional juggler, right? And learning these physical skills. It's just like, this is so me. I love this. And I've been able to incorporate and keep that in my life in some form or fashion. And that came from a mentor who said, Dan, I see what this means to you. Don't ever let this out of your life. You got to keep it there somehow. And so I took that to heart. Well, I believe all of us have those gifts that come into our life. Those when we're maybe younger and we're searching for a sense of identity, and we discover an area of interest or a hobby or just an activity or something that resonates with who we truly are. And over time in our life, we tend to just let those slip a little bit to the bottoms of our list because we think, oh, we'll get back to them someday. Instead, I think we need to look at all these spheres: your work, your relationships, your health, your spirit, your personal interests, and say, how do we connect them? How do we look at it differently, that they don't have to be mutually exclusive, that they can be mutually supportive? If we can design our life in a way that they are connected, this idea of the lifelines, you'll remember how you,
Yes.
how does my work really impact my health and my family and my spiritual journey? And we say, let's strengthen those connections between all of the different spheres. And that's when it gets fun, because you start making a lot better choices.
One of the things I really thought was really powerful too is you talked about in your book, you talked about the spheres and the connections, but then you also talked about the disconnect that happens in the workplace. So the way that, you have organizations that function, but they function in silos. And I feel like it's a representation of how we live. A lot of times we represent, it's kind of like on an individual level, we compartmentalize because that's how we were raised, or that's how we were taught. You have to do this. In
Sure.
organizations, compartmentalization, inefficiencies, and it's like that's kind of the cycle that we seem to run into. But I think your book helps us to better understand how to integrate those different areas of ourselves, and you tell us that it's okay.
Yeah, and one of the biggest shortfalls, whether it's organizationally or personally, is when you attempt to silo everything. By the time you realize something's really truly broken, it's often too late to really do anything to
Mm.
prevent it from happening. And so when we expand our view and say, how does this all fit together? Then we can have a much clearer picture of when things are on a collision course, of when one strategy in one area is just, there's just no way it's going to make sense with something else that's also important to you in your life. And there are some scenarios, like if your example, if like you getting your degree, right? You were off balance in that direction,
Oh my
and you
God.
had to be. It was grueling. It was tough, right? And that was a decision that you made because you could see on the other side of that. Listen, I can't necessarily at this moment for this period of time be as dedicated to other aspects of my life as I may want to be, but I'm not letting them go. They're still connected because on the other side of this journey, which I do see on the horizon, that this will help me fulfill and bring something new back to those other areas in a way that they are enhanced and connected. Does that make
That's
sense?
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. The other thing I wanted to just ask you about was, so as a performer, you perform, and the things that you do, like you talked about suspending disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that in just in what you do? I mean, you have to have your belief and your faith has to be so strong. I mean, because you do some amazing things.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah. So for people who haven't seen my videos or whatever, I do handstand push-ups on the lectern, and I throw knives around and ride unicycles
Yep.
and step into these moments that are, they now on the one hand, it's something I practiced and prepared for all my life. So for me, that doesn't feel as risky as it would for someone who's not as experienced. But there is that sense of uncertainty. Um, I do get nervous. I mean, I think everybody gets a little anxiety before any kind of important event or performance in your life. And the way I look at it is you have to have that. If you don't feel that sense of edge or anxiousness, um, it doesn't really mean as much to you, and you're just kind of going through the motions. So I try to just translate it into excitement. I say, I'm just really excited about this opportunity. I say a prayer before I go on stage. And then again, I try not to be perfect. I try to be really present, focus on the audience. It's not about me. And the less I can make it about me and the more I can make it about them, the more successful it always is, really. And everybody gets to participate in that success, including me.
All right. So I have one last question that I want to ask you. So if anybody is going to get this book, which tons of people have and more will, what would you say are the keys, the key points that you want them to take away from this book?
Wow, that's a great one.
Could be 2 or 3.
Okay, well, I think it's what I've heard is it's different things to different people, and people tend to revisit the book over a long period of time
Good.
and get more depth out of it. The whole philosophy, the first third of the book, are these really different, what seem like counterintuitive ideas about, not trying to achieve balance. The idea that in order to get something, you have to let go. You have to let go in order to get a grip. And so this idea of abandoning what you thought was the right answer. The idea that not enough time is not the problem. So we use time as this excuse in our life, and it's really not the deal at all. So we got to let go of that. The idea that struggling is, the gift of the grind, that there is actually a joy and a benefit that comes when we face the most difficult hardships in our life, and here's why, that type of thing. So those philosophical principles help set your mind right? And so I would want people to take one of those that really makes a personal connection, and you're like, wow, I could really live this principle, and that's going to help me. And then the second third of the book is about this idea of the life pattern and how to connect things. Again, it's a totally different way of thinking. And I guess that's the real key. That's the real meat of the book for me, is this idea that what's important to you in all aspects of your life, they don't have to be in competition all the time. They can be connected. And when you show up for anything, you can show up with everything, all of you in what you do.
That's powerful.
And then the last third is like this process of how you do that. You have to own your reality first of all, and then seek your purpose. Talk to people about how to actually discover your purpose, how to initiate the right change. In other words, lean forward and make yourself uncomfortable. Because if you limit yourself to what's comfortable, you deny yourself what's possible, right? And then how you can use what you have, leverage your resources, ultimately follow through and achieve what you want. So I think the joy of writing a book is you get to put it all out there. And maybe I've got some ideas of what people will, what I hope they will get out of it. But it really is a very personal thing. And the idea is it takes on a life of its own. And what people actually get from this quite often is something very different than what I intended.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for taking the time to just do this interview with me. It was amazing. And anybody that is listening today, please get this book, because it will help you to really better understand how you can achieve life balance and how you can drive towards your purpose. And you can find Dan at danthurman.com.
Yep.
Check him out. Or check out the TED Talks he did.
Yep.
You can see him in action. He's what I call a personification of performance. So check him out. All right, Dan, take care. Bye.